start.
Silva, can I start?
Yes, sir, you can start, sir, please.
Yeah. Respected Chairman, CA Cinnamon sir, in absentia. Respected CA Pal Jayakar sir, Speaker of the Day. Respected members of this profession attending this program, and the SIRC office support personnel. Namaskaram to you all. Our SIRC is continuously arranging programs, and we are getting the support from our members, and also non-members also attending the programs, and with various topics selected by our CPE committee, and with other committees. There are a lot of committees like Accounting and Auditing Standards Committee, Ethical Standard Committee, and Ethical Standard Committee, and Company Law Committee is there, along with the insolvency professionals. There are a lot of committees like that. So we have a Direct Tax Committee, Indirect Tax Committee. There are a lot of committees, and we are continuously IT, Information Technology Committee. So we are continuously arranging programs, and with the support of the members who are interested in the subject and attending the programs as an encouragement to the organizers. And in this information technology profession, in our profession with the information technology committee, today's program is cyber security audit, a virtual CPE program on cyber security audit. And the resource person, I think we'll have to be very, very specific in this area. This is a new, this is not a new area, but still we require a lot of inputs on this, because this is most developing area, and there has been a lot of inputs which are coming, and therefore in the day by day we need to be updated on this. There are a lot of technologies coming in the information technology area, so we'll have to update ourselves. And in this regard, we have Mr. CA Pal Jayakar, okay, who is to take the session of the day on this cyber technologies. And he is 1956 born, and is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India since 1981, and is an All India rank holder in intermediate, 49 rank holder. And he has got post-qualification experience in insurance and risk management, DIRM, from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and is also certified in risk and information system control. And is a 10.5 units of credits from Health Zenith Systems USA postal course. Sir, I need to know about this, sir. You can explain when you are taking the class, because I need to know about it. So, and is basically a PhD holder from Madras University on a research titled "A Vulnerable Study of Web-Based E-commerce Systems in Internet Security" from the University of Madras. And he has qualified MCOM in 1995 and BCom in 1977. And he is from Anglo-Indian High School, Chennai, Tamil Nadu. And his current assignments is Director, IT and RM Information Systems and Risk Management Services. And his experience in financial institutions, banking and NBFC, manufacturing, airports, seaports, service industry, infrastructure, power plants, conventional and non-conventional, and others. And his technical experience is that he has taught various subjects. I think you are a good faculty for all of us. Taught various subjects related to finance, management, IT, computer science, computer applications, programming languages, and software engineering for the past 40 years. Was on the syllabus committee for MCA, University of Madras 1984, and Board of Studies, member Sri Saraswati Tyagaraja College, Polachi. And he has presented papers in the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and All India Regional and CPA seminars. He has ISACA regional seminars. With this small profile, I think you need a more bigger profile. And he has also is a SIRC study circles he has presented, and in University of Madras seminars conducted by the Department of Commerce, Management, Criminology, and Computer Science. Sir, we need to know a lot of things from you, sir. We expect you to give us a lot of things about this cyber crimes, cyber audits. Rather, thank you, sir. With this introduction, I seek your presentation, sir. Sir Pal Jayakar, sir. The forum is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for the nice words. I'll start the presentation. Once I start, I'll switch off the camera for bandwidth. I'll put it on again when we take a break. What I'll do is first I'll share the screen.
Visible, sir.
So now that the screen is visible,
Yes,
I'll hold on to the screen and I'm turning the camera off. So
okay, sir. Noted.
yeah, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Selva,
Visible,
is the
sir.
screen-
Visible.
Yes, sir.
Visible, sir. Visible,
Right.
sir. In front of us.
So before we start, I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes to explain the need for this topic. Originally, cybersecurity meant something to do with the internet. That was how it started. The word cyber was more for cyberspace. When Americans started using it more for the internet. But then over a period of time, over the last 20, 25 years, the word cyber no longer means the internet. And unfortunately, right now it means all computer security, everything, networks, hardware, data, whatever it is, communication, smart contracts. So the word cyber is, I mean, the meaning of cyber has changed drastically, and our regulators and lawmakers, including whatever MCA, SEBI, IRDA, look at the whole lot of them, PFRDA, etc. They have started using the word cybersecurity to mean entire, in olden days, what we called as EDP or IT or IS, all that plus internet is today called cybersecurity. Now, one of the challenges is the statutory auditor also has to sign off on the cybersecurity because the meaning changed. People no longer said this is internet. This is a part of our daily data processing requirements. Now, with that background, if you look at cybersecurity, the point is we have to remember all that we studied over the years, plus add on the concept of cloud computing and networking and internet and whatever all the new things. Now, this is actually, it used to be a separate topic for IT auditors, then it became an integrated topic for the internal auditors, and today it has become a requirement for the statutory auditors. So there's no distinction. I'm not breaking this up for internal or external or IS auditors. Whatever be the type of audit we are doing, this is important. So that's the background I want to start with. Nothing special. It's not for technology people. Of course, we are changing now. We have got our own standards. We have to use this even for a standard statutory audits. Okay, the thing is, I've just taken one statement. We can skim over it. What it says is, the harder I work, the more I am lucky. So what it means is that sometimes I do come across statutory auditors who kind of outsource the cyber audit portion of it. But I keep convincing them that they can learn, they can bring it into their systems. It's not to be separated from the rest of the audit. So the first slide show, we'll have a bit of theory. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat. I will answer all of them at the end. The one is the cyber security. Okay, some simple terms. It's everything, all your security policies, procedures, their effectiveness, etc. I'm using the word cybersecurity to specifically to emphasize whatever we are learning, IT audit, IS audit, change the name to cybersecurity audit. That's all you have to do. Otherwise, it's the same topic, but with a little more portion added to it. Now it's also the audit identifies internal controls. We are all used to this risk management, but regulatory deficiencies. That means regulators also tell us what we should be doing regarding cybersecurity. And if you look at the audit per se, this sensitive data is defined in the IT Act. For us, it's the IT Act 2000 modified or revised 2008 and so on. But it also includes intellectual property, which we are, I mean, it's a long awaited thing. The Data Privacy Act is now renamed as the Data Protection Act for India, still a bill. But we have to work with other acts, the European and the US acts. Some of you may be already there. Some of you may be learning things like GDPR and so on. So the next thing we look at is protection of data. Now, this is again, as you know, a lot of rules. If you have, I got a lot of links in the slide. So when you come to those slides, you can take a picture on your camera or the photo, I mean, your phone. Please visit those links, because I want you to understand that today a statutory audit, except the very large companies who have very comprehensive audits, the other auditors signing off for mainly public and listed companies miss out on a lot of these, and the risks are getting higher and higher. Then we come to protection of networks. All these days we thought network belonged to somebody else. I only have a wire coming into the office. But now they say if you can't protect the network, then you have to protect the data in the network by encrypting it or doing something to it. It's like a road, you know, if you're driving, a road belongs to the government, but you got to be safe that not only do you cause any damage to yourself, you're not causing damage to others also. Then responsibility and accountability, obviously that's all part of the laws, and in fact company laws got a lot of these points, but we have to look at the other laws also. I'll give you a list of those. Then when you do a cyber security audit, you have to read these policies, or as internal auditors you can draft these policies, take it as a consulting assignment. We need data security. Once you go in for data security, everything is covered, your hardware, your software, your networks, not just the data. Wherever the data moves, it's called data in transit. If it's at rest, it's called data at rest. You got these protection responsibility. Then we also have loss prevention. If data is stolen while it is in our custody, it's as simple as a bank which gave a jewel loan and they kept the jewel somewhere and lost it. The bank is responsible. They can't, shirk their responsibility. Similarly, once data is given to an organization, of course, we have to get the consent form. That's a new thing which you have to follow. Once the data is in the custody of the organization, the auditor also comments that the data is safe or it can be easily stolen, whatever his opinion is between high risk and low risk. The network access. Of course, if you cannot prevent access, then you must go in for extensive encryption. Then we also have detection and prevention of people plugging in unwanted devices. Today, as you're aware, telephones or these mobile phones can hook on to Bluetooth, wireless, infrared, internet, I mean, a whole lot of things. They can come into an organization or sit out in the car park, or in our Madras environment, no car park, they can sit on the road, and they can intrude into systems. It's a lot of work, but then the question usually I get is, should an auditor learn all this? Yes, we have to. It's like books of account becoming electronic in the Companies Act, which says whatever the IT Act says, those are books of account. We'll have to learn it. Security controls established. Physical, logical is the easy part. You're preventing people from coming in physically and preventing remote logins, people from remote locations trying to steal your data. Then incident response. Now there's a fight going on between certain and the industry. They said within 6 hours you have to report a data theft or incident. Companies, corporate world is saying give us 72 hours. Well, it's okay. I mean, fights are still going on. But if you remember, in corporate governance, if a serious event happens, incident happens, the website has to be, listed companies of course, website has to be updated within 2 hours. So the government of India is slowly making the time window very short. for these electronic and online incidents. Then standards. Now this is where we become global. All these days we just stay to the Indian Income Tax Act, Indian Companies Act, and wherever we said there's an Indian Act. Now we are saying international acts will apply wherever an Indian Act is not complete. For instance, even in Multimodal Transport of Goods Act, or even your Transport Carriage by Sea Act, wherever there's a deficiency in the Indian Act, either the British Act or the American or best practices or EU directives, they take over. So do we have a compilation of these? Not readily, but no book or author, Indian book or author, but we can kind of start working internet, RBI and so on, but slowly we will have to study the acts which are not passed in India but applicable to our business. This is one of the challenges, more than the technology challenge. This is the bigger challenge. Then this environment includes everybody, users, and users includes machines and software also, networks, devices, software processes. Today we have some IoTs, we have mobile phones, we have all kinds of devices. I mean, can an auditor really give an assurance on all these? Well, slowly we have to start looking at them. Now, some of these standards, some of them you already know. 27,000 is a common standard. It basically talks about the information security, everything, hardware, software, everything. So I'll just skip over this. But when you come to the others, see what happened is, come to the third bullet, the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, they have got a set of rules and act which applies to a data center. Now, generally a data center for us means a room with lock and key, air conditioning, power supply, somewhere in the organization. Bigger companies, they have a data center, like say a bank or an insurance company. But now the government says you have to follow certain minimum infrastructure protection. Actually, it's a code, a COD. That's the word the Americans will use. Now, what the Indian system did is they just copied the whole thing from the American document. And nothing wrong. I mean, it's perfectly all right. But the problem is the compliances. The American, see, US had data centers long before India had, so they are more mature. Now, when we take a document from there and bring it in here, it's like adding airbags and whatever you call seat belts to an ambassador car. It's not going to work so well. So one of the challenges the auditor faced was, how do we address this issue? Now it's easy. You tell them to go to a cloud computing center. So effectively, this act, auditor is outsourced. He said cloud computing center will follow the rules, just put your computers there. But now the second part is, once you put it there, the responsibility remains the same. So auditor has to again understand what this cloud computer center is doing or that outsourced data center is doing. So I know you'll find this hard to get on the internet. You can get the first one, North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, you'll get straight away. National Critical, I think we have only 2 websites. I mean, if you have patience, you search for them. Otherwise, just go to this US thing. And today there are certified people who will sign for the infrastructure. So you can take their signature. Now we have another standard, ISO. Most of these will be ISO, where it's called the common criteria. So what we are saying is, if I bought hardware from one company, software from another company, networking devices, okay, let's say I got IBM hardware, Cisco routers, I bought software from Microsoft, etc., etc. Is there a way I can get an integrated test certificate? Now that is where this common criteria ISO standard comes in. The common criteria deals with the security functions and the security assessments. Now, there are times when we work in an integrated environment. It's not a big company, it's a small company, a hotel, for instance. They have got a software solution which takes care of everything, right from the door lock reprogramming up to whatever entry, whatever the metal detector and billing and restaurant barcoding, etc. You have to test the entire software as one integrated unit. It's not a large software like a big SAP installation. It's not a big factory. It's a small hotel, maybe like a OYO or Fab Hotels or something like that. and they have a complete automated environment. This standard makes sense. So you may come across smaller clients who have put in a complete solution. I don't see much of it here, but as you go to Western India, a lot of these smaller units have gone for integrated solutions. So that's when the common criteria plays a large role. Or take your Swiggy or whatever, he has a phone, you have a phone, you have an app, he has got an app, and you don't know where the rest of the system is. You may be auditing a franchisee, maybe the complete Swiggy itself, or maybe one area of Swiggy, maybe delivering on time. The previous one will help us out. Now, if you have much larger and complex issues, then we go for the NIST, is National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now they have got a complete set of rules. I wouldn't say rules, but set of guidelines, framework. This is very comprehensive. See, what happens is, if you come to this third bullet in small letters, the fundamental rights which you have to provide are equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. Now, except for very large data centers like banks, insurance companies, I mean, it's also impractical for a small company or a small entity, a college, for instance. How will they comply with all this? It gets too complicated. So what they do is they just go to a data center with all these capabilities already certified. But in case you're either setting up the center or evaluating a center from somebody else to put their software, you'll have to work with both the previous one, the infrastructure one, which is here, and the NIST cybersecurity network. This is like more like a thorough due diligence audit. It's not like a standard sign off, but a lot of compliances have to be checked with. Now we have for small and medium industries, there's a UK standard, which is like 27001 ISMS security, but much lesser amount of requirements. That's why I started by saying we have to now start looking at international standards, and actually international laws are more important, but today it's just the audit component, so I'm restricting to it. But if you are a compliance auditor, then foreign laws also will have to be looked at. Maybe some other day we could do that. Now we have the US banking regulators. Now we use a number called, we call it IFSC code and so on, but very soon, I mean, you're already aware, we use what is called the International Bank Code, IBC numbers. Now, SWIFT is almost, it's there, it's not gone, it's still there, but more and more people are using wire transfers and those kind of things. Whatever is Western Union, we are familiar with all this because locally we use a lot of those wallets and QR code based payments, mobile payments, and so on. Now the banking regulators have got a lot of these assessments to be done in terms of technology and connection types, delivery channels, etc. Okay, all these are what a normal average person, not a chartered accountant, maybe a watchman or somebody who's got a phone with a GPay. Now whatever he's using, now if you have to audit those channels, we have to look at these guidelines because we are part of the G20. We have signed some agreements. In fact, our gyro banking, white label ATMs, all of them are from the G20 agreements. So we know these are all there, and of course we'll follow the regulations. Now we have another thing, which is the European Telecommunications standards. Originally they are very popular as IEEE, but now all of them changed their names. But anyway, the point here is, now what is a technical committee got to do with an auditor? Now as organizations move ahead to radio frequency cards, swipe cards, QR codes, barcodes, Internet of Things are the small devices which keep transmitting, then the problem now is, what are we auditing? We are not even auditing data. We have to know audit a device. Because in one of the recent Rabbit audits, that is, Rabbit is the IT audit wing of RBI, they found in some banks, because they buy latest equipment, that attendance recording biometric system has got a CPU inside and it does some processing. Hackers are able to access that software and steal One is they steal patterns, other is they can steal fingerprints also. Because the fingerprint finally goes to a server, but server is secure, but its reading unit is not so secure. Because the reading unit is smart. Smart means it has a CPU like our smartphone or so many devices, smart air conditioners, smart refrigerators. See, when you use a remote when you use a phone as a remote to control your air conditioner, remember that somebody who hacks into your phone can also hack into your air conditioner. Now, these are, okay, these are the problems. Like, today an auditor knows all about embezzlement, fraud. We have written books on it. We got forensic. It's the same way we are evolving now, just learning, starting. So we will become experts over the next 30, 40 years. But right now we have to make a start somewhere. We have to begin. Next is we have the standard of good practice for the Information Security Forum. Now this is just best practices. They don't certify anything, but they just give you the best practices which you can follow, which are more or less in tune with all the regulators I mentioned earlier. Now we have the operational technology. The operational technology was all buttons and switches. It was safe. Then it all became a little automated where computers turn on themselves. They'll download in the night time. They'll transmit when the load is low and all that. It was okay, acceptable. Then came a problem when the machine decides when it's going to work, when it's not going to work, when load balancing takes place. Now we have a rule in the Companies Act which says data must be mirrored in India, at least mirrored in India. Bank says SMSs must be routed only through servers located in India. Let's say a computer broke down. Automatically, it will load balance and replicate data to a different country's server. You are violating both the company law and the Banking Act or the RBI's directive. But do we know about it? For instance, even your Open Office, not Open Office, the Microsoft Office, actually their fallback is when the server in India fails, it will fall back on a server in China. For a long time, we had blacklisted certain countries like South Africa, China and Hong Kong and all that. So, but that's where the servers are. So we ask for a certificate, which is at a point of time, March 31st. And the companies ensure on March 31st, nothing breaks down. But during there, if you take a SOC certificate, you'll find at points in time it broke down, data went out, came back. It's encrypted, it's fine. I'm not saying it's not safe, but what I'm saying is non-compliant. Because those who write our laws are not always up to date on technology. So, so they wrote something thinking it's the best thing to say. But unfortunately, in a global scenario, data moves up and down. It's like a mobile phone. You're talking to someone while you're driving or traveling. You'll be leaving one cell and latching to another cell. And if you have crossed into a state where MTNL works, it's okay. It will simply send an SMS to you, which you'll see much later. Welcome to something, and MTNL is now servicing, but your conversation can go on. So that's why I wanted to read these, because many times a lot of auditors are not reading circulars. Unfortunately, they're all called circulars, which means like letters. Suddenly some regulator has a mood, he issues a letter. It doesn't inform anyone. You'll have to go to his website and check. So these are difficulties in India, but anyway, I guess we get used to it. So we have certification for packages which you buy off the shelf, which includes your virus scanners. Lots of software you're downloading into your phones. They call them apps. Those things, control systems, CCTV and whatever IoTs and so on. And addressing the control systems supply chain. But this is happening in meter reading for energy companies, SCADA reading, traffic light control, those kind of things. Also, when we say supply chain, it may be products and services, but can also mean signals on traffic, signals on wind conditions. Those kind of things we'll have to look at. Then cybersecurity standards are this last word here, multi-industry standards, which means if you take an industry, let's say something like say for instance, door delivery. It involves warehousing, barcoding, people on motorcycles who are to be insured. It involves insurance for theft of packets. It involves a lot of things. So maybe one industry by industry, when you take up your cybersecurity requirements, you'll understand that even hospitals have the same problem with blood banks, those biomedical devices, etc., implants, and so on. Now, this is a slide I wanted you to actually photograph. Have a look at these websites, the MAITI and whatever, they have all these rules. I told you only 2 websites are there for the data center rules. And then, of course, we have the cybersecurity standards. These are all getting updated. Day by day, they're updated. And you can just, just see the website. You don't have to worry about reading them. There's no exam or anything. As we continue, this is the RBI docs, the notification for urban and cooperative banks. As you know, very difficult to audit these banks. They are under political control sometimes. But better the auditor knows the liability before taking up such audits. This diagram is from CERT-In. That's our Indian counterpart of the cert.org. Another thing is there's nothing like computer science. Actually, CERT is actually this is a particle physics laboratory, and so it's actually what I'm trying to say is math, statistics, physics, chemistry, whatever we are reading, BCom, maths, all those make sense when you're studying this subject. So this has got nothing to do with engineers or programmers. It has to do with everybody. So starting with cybersecurity, if you look at technology, then you are breaking up into defenses, perimeter defenses are your firewalls and so on. Backup recovery is your BCP. Encryption, again, we are talking about data at rest, data in transit, making it unreadable. Then digital signatures for all this integrity, authenticity. Now we are using signatures quite a lot in India, the class 3 signatures, class 2. Now if you take the same cyber security, you look at policies, then you're looking at evaluation of these policies, implementation. So if you look at a lot of these, password policy is slowly dying because they got more into biometrics. Now, so we have incident handling increasing because legislation says you must report in 6 hours, but right now the fight is going on. Backup recovery, 0 downtime, then risks are also there. Same cybersecurity, another point of view, when you're planning, what do we have to know? How do we fund cybersecurity? Who are the people? What are the tools we use? What is the configuration management? I'll expand on all these. So this part, the planning part and the technology part is what I'm going to tell you. This is a real audit part. This is more a consulting part where you develop policies and do more a compliance kind of thing and or help them to comply. Corporate assets is all safety from thieves and hackers who are trying to steal your passwords and get into your networks, use your computing power, leak out data, those kind of things. So this diagram sums up what an IT auditor, what is expected from a cybersecurity auditor. So when we look at the word assurance, some of it may be consulting, I fully agree. But from a cybersecurity assurance, CERT-In has recommended these skills, but of course we need more than this, but let's start with this. This is a minimum. You can break it up the same way. Take your most favorite topic first, like planning or technology or whatever it is. Learn one by one. So by the time we finish, yeah, we are very good cybersecurity auditors. I'll quickly run across those various areas. But if you looked at a complete cybersecurity, see, this is more from skill sets we require. Now, this is more from what are the areas I'd like to concentrate on. Let's say there is more, in fact, there's more opportunity in web cybersecurity audits. The reason is everybody uses web and they'll say the server is somewhere else. So the clients, you have more clients or more business available in the front end, the website end. So one is you do the website security audit. You normally say follow the OWASP standards. Then you have the application security audit, which is not the website, but more the programs which do things like payroll, inventory, data and so on. Then we have infrastructure security. That's where I showed you those guidelines, where we have the American guideline and the Indian guideline, where we check the security of the infrastructure, which is everything: building, wiring, pest controls, BCP, whatever kinds of incidents we could have because of the infrastructure. And we have security assurance and incident response. This is more like safety register, risk register, so which we'll have to take care of. Then server security audit is not the application, but servers are, today there's a newer concept called virtualization, where one physical computer works as if it's a number of different computers. Only one computer, but you're running 5 instances of, say, operating systems, 3 Windows instances and 2 Unix instances. From the outside world, it'll look like 5 computers, but inside the data center, there's only one hardware. So when we say server security, we are talking both the machine and the software. We are talking both. This maybe we could do some other time. It's we need to do it actually as a little hands-on. It's or you can just install the server virtual machine VM. That's the virtualization concept. Then we have the security policies audit. This is more on a compliance front. So taking each one, let's start at the website. You'll have to do a testing of the web pages itself. You can do it either by understanding the code and doing it, or you can just simply run some tools, or maybe just test the web page, be satisfied with it. Risk is it's better if you understand the JavaScript and the HTML and do a better audit of it. Then standard audit tools, I'll go through a list of them at the end. Then report generation systems. Once your websites are working, you call them logs, LOGS. That's the only audit trail the auditor will have. So you have to make sure these reports are properly generated. Now they say I have to keep it for 6 months, but they will go by the standard of keeping it by 1 year at least. This is very important in terms of TV stations, news channels. They have to they come under a different act. They have to mandatorily keep it for 1 year. If it's a standard company, a trading company, a business company, manufacturing company, then maybe 6 months would be okay. Then again, website vulnerabilities. This is called vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. There are standard tools. Why we say tools, it's a lot easier than trying to write our own programs. And if you looked at the books in the 80s and 90s, they said the auditor will write software and test, but that was okay because of batch processing. But today it's not possible. And there's so much of technology, so better to use a tool and be done with it. The audits also, this OWASP, as I told you, this is the vulnerability checklist we get. Today, all our cybersecurity audits for the web-based part of the audit, it's better to just take the top 10 vulnerabilities, use a tool or a few tools to assess it, and then close the chapter. See, as a statutory auditor, you're not a technology auditor. They need only a assurance that everything is going well with the organization and its system. So that should be fine. But if you are a consultant on an IT audit as a consultancy assignment, then obviously you'll have to come out with solutions to problems also. In the application security audit, which is the second one, again applied tests. Basically, I would still suggest we learn at least the architecture at the flowchart level, like say BPMN diagrams or block diagrams, just to understand what this package or software is doing. Then you also conduct audit based on the security checklist. There are a lot of, they call them toolkits. Checklist is what we call them, but generally they call them toolkits. They try to sell it to you. Most of the toolkits are about $100, which is, I mean, if the client is important, then it's fine, like a SOX checklist or an ISO checklist. But otherwise, for smaller audits, you can use a standard free checklist. That should be okay. If you need some checklists also, please mail me. I'll definitely send it to you. But then it's all the risk and how big is the business and, or how critical is the business. It all depends on that, because if I said paid checklists you can use for the big clients is they are so detailed. By the time you fill it, it'll take a long time. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of knowledge also. Smaller companies, they buy packages. They are not really doing anything complicated. So it'll be a lot easier if we just work with standard checklists. Then if you look at this, check the website vulnerabilities again based on the tools. And then you'll look at standard audit tools. I'll go through all the tools at the end. And then we use the audit system, the automated report generation. This is the output from the tools. Now I know Nessus and those kind of tools you can download, very good, the professional tools. They're paid software, but you get the free version, 14 days trial and so on. Sometimes you get only one client a year. 14 days is a lot of time. You can easily use it. But the problem is you have to interpret the output. That's why you may have to look at the internet again, or maybe one good textbook you could invest in to start interpreting what the tool is saying. If it says port 21 is open, FTP port 21 is open, first we need to know, is it necessary for that business? Are they using that port? Are they using an alternate port? Do they download anything, first of all? A lot of those questions from the knowledge of the business you will have. Then you will be in a clear position to say, yes, the client for this server, the port is fine, it's justified, or the client's business for this server, the port is not justified. So that's when the application audit comes in. Here you have more or less the steps here. So you can see these steps. You check your files, you check the connections, and so on. Actually, it's very easy. What I would suggest, you get an old desktop or something. Why a desktop is because you can open it up and you can keep adding hardware to it. Laptops are not that easy to rip open and add hardware. Only USB port will be available. So you have a desktop, it's a lot easier. You can buy cheap hardware also. They add these add-on cards, and then you put a dual boot, put a virtualization software. There's a virtual box. It's from Oracle. It's free. You can put it, run Windows and Linux, and then start experimenting. Even if you don't learn anything, it's okay. You can always sell off the machine. But right now, if you could do that, it's a lot more easier than all these pictures and checklists and so many things which I give. If you just try it out, maybe it's not easy at the beginning, but after a little while, you'll be very comfortable with it. Because unfortunately, there are no courses for this, no audit institute or any commerce course. They have not introduced this because there's a mix of both maths, statistics, computer science, and accounts auditing. So as far as I know, nobody's interested also, but you can just learn it on your own. It's possible. Now the network infrastructure security audit is again tool based, because I told you most of the network will never be yours. It's all public network. We subscribe to the internet. Other chap also subscribe to the internet, and that's all. And somebody comes and says, can you say whether my payment application is secure? It's a telephone company, there's a cell company, there's a internet facility provider, there's a bank, there's a payment gateway. How do we assure anybody of anything? So that's where this comes in. Now first you have to okay, all the security checklists, etc. Make sure they are with the international standard. Long back when I used to teach, we'll say international standards are higher. Indian standards were very low. We had only VSNL somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s, whatever. Just started. Then only 90s we have given email and all those things. We said we are very backward, so let's study it and follow. Today, I have to tell you the opposite. India is very advanced. India and China are very advanced. The rest of the world is horribly backward, including certain European countries and most of USA. Now, big headache for us because they are still our customers or investors or joint venture holders or whatever it is. So we need to understand the international standard. Now the gap analysis goes the reverse direction. What India wants and what they want. And they have simply written laws, not updating the hardware. Now, which is a big complication for us because What they cannot do, they say, if you want to deal with our country, you have to follow all this. So then you start using a lot of software, encryption, tokenization, authorization, all kinds of things we start using. That is where the auditor has to be very careful. India is okay, fine, we are fine. We are going to get 5G also. We are fine. We take it for granted, but rest of the world you can't take for granted. So you will have to ensure the SSL certificates or or whatever the algorithms you are using or the technology you are using is all in place, and we have got these standards. Of course, you get them off the internet. You get it from the government sites, US government, whatever, European Union, and so on. Then, of course, you audit the entire system, etc. Then you check the vulnerabilities. Again, everywhere I'm putting website, because today most of the front ends are website. Most they still use client server. I'm not denying it, but it's very, very small, and client server is safe. It's a website which give us trouble. Then the automated report generation is all your results and audit trails. And in case of this network infrastructure, these reports you generate will also be an audit evidence when you give assurances on the data protection. That's something which you have to include, because if you just encrypt, it's not enough. You have to say whether you're using tunneling or, I mean, how are your connections secure? So it's not just enough if I just put the parcel, I mean, secure the parcel in a tight packing and waterproof packing. I also have to assure you that the courier service is reliable. So if I give it a unknown courier, it's not safe. The same parcel, if I give it a Blue Dart or DHL, it's safe. So that's what I'm saying. So infrastructure is like your courier service. We don't know them, but if you know them, they are better. So the better infrastructure companies, whoever's giving you the connections, they will have a reputation, and they will give you some assurances. You can depend on them. Otherwise, you have to run all the tools yourself and satisfy yourself. So that's why I said you examine the, okay, this is the same thing which you saw there, so I'll skip this. Now in the server security audit, there are two operating systems. Macintosh we can consider, but if you, very few people really use Macintosh for commercial work. Earlier, desktop publishing, they used to use it. They also dropped out. Macintosh is Apple computers. So most of it will be Windows, including your Google phone, Android phone. It uses Linux as the core. It's built on that. And then you have Linux, of course, which is Linux, Unix, all flavors of it, whatever Unix. So this is where we need to look at this server security. One is we look at the server security checklist. In India, they call it a hardening checklist, HARDENING. It's just a name, but it's the same thing. The other side is we have to be compatible with international standards. Now you may be wondering why US leads, because US was the kind of the mentor and the chief champion sponsor of the internet. So though it's not a rich country now, but it still controls most of the internet, in terms of all the regulatory bodies at IASB, and they have the Internet Engineering Task Force, etc., IETF. So they have a lot of those bodies under their control, including DNS, a domain name service. So we can't really ignore them. So we have to, but any standard book will have all this. So nothing difficult there. And when we look at the information security management for the social engineering, this is people being the major vulnerabilities in the system, where, like you get emails, phone calls, messages, and people fall a prey to it. They call up and ask, saying you're getting a reward, redeem your points. So many stories they come out with. So they're checking something, so give your PIN number or OTP number. So this is where the auditor has to make phone calls, pretending to be an insider or an outsider, and he has to try to get some information from this. He also has to coordinate with the system administrators, pretend to be a customer. They call it mystery shopping. Pretend to be a customer. Then he send attachments with emails, trying to get people to, or luring people to open the, see, in the part of the security training, unfortunately in the IFC guideline, no, fortunately or unfortunately, issued by IFC guideline issued by our ICAI, they have said training calendar is mandatory and awareness of the policies regard to all the people, including employees, customers, etc., is mandatory. So you know, you have filled the IFC, so you know the guideline. So we must make sure that employees are aware of all these rules and security rules, that they should not answer strangers' calls, they should not give away OTPs and so on, they should not open unknown attachments. But you know, all the time somebody does something wrong, you see in the papers, they always keep losing money. So we have to do a, it's more like a mystery shopping audit. The auditor doesn't take data or anything, but he tries to misguide the people in the organization. If they get misguided, obviously the risks are very high. Your report will be highly qualified. If things are good, then it's fine. Okay, so that's my email. I've just come to the end of the first one, but we still have a lot more to go. So you could note down my email. I'll answer all the questions at the end, but in case you have any specific question even later on, please do mail me, so I'll answer to the best of my ability. Okay, so now we'll go to the second is the screen visible? Somebody could respond. Is the screen visible? I'll take it for granted you're able to see this. So, okay, so what I'll do is it's actually a little bit of animation, so we break away from the monotony of our slides. Now what we are looking at is a typical network with all the machines and servers and whatever has to be there. So here, if you see, one is we have this small block here. We'll take that as a firewall. Now we have got some machines here. I will start with the internet. So that's where the outside world is. The internet is the, okay, this is where the outside world we are connecting to. Now from the outside world, when we try to come into this organization's network, now the background is this network is not in one place. It can be, let's say, all India network or global network, it can be anywhere. But these are all under the control of a single company. Whereas the internet and what's outside is not in our control, it's totally outside. So when you are inside in the organization, what we find is that we have got some servers here. Just ignore the DMZ, I'll tell you what it means. We have got some servers here. We have got other servers somewhere here, a few more servers here, and a few more servers here. Okay, so we have a lot of servers which are located all over the place, but they're all under the control of this organization. Let's say company A. So what company A does is it buys a device called a firewall, this yellow thing here. Now this is a software. It's actually used to be software. Now they sell it to you as an hardware also, an appliance. But unfortunately, they'll stop supporting it after 4 years or 5 years. So generally, if you're a big company, you can afford to replace them. But smaller companies, if they go for a software solution, at least I can keep upgrading the software by paying the subscription. Now this firewall is now going to block unwanted or say malicious people or information or programs coming from the internet into the network. So we have got a border router here. This is actually called the external gateway. They call it external gateway protocol. This one will know all about things on the internet, where to route your traffic, how to send it out. I mean, how do you resolve those names, etc. The name means that IP addresses and all those English names you give, all that this can do, the border router can do. Then what's the internal router doing? Internal router knows all the machines inside the organization's network. Now the organization's network can also be global, but all the systems are under their control. Just one more thing is, suppose we have this line here connecting our internal router to some LAN here. This line need not be our own wire. It can also be public internet, but it will be fully under your control. So they will use what is called a layer 2 tunneling protocol, or maybe in the work from home context, we use the word virtual private network, which means that particular connection, public connection, is kind of encrypted. But more than the encryption part, because encryption is important, but more than the encryption part, the IP address, that is the like a registration number on the vehicle, your computer will have an IP address. It's assigned an IP address. That address can be resolved and treated as a part of the network, not a part of the outside internet. Anyway, since we started with this IP address, think of your motor car or motorcycle or whatever, some vehicle which is registered. The RC book will have two numbers. One will have a chassis number or a number which the manufacturer stamped on it, and a number which is given by the registration office, the RTO's office, which we'll call as a registration number. So a vehicle will have two numbers. You'll have some number TN something, and you'll have another number which is a long number stamped by the manufacturer. Now let's say you sold your vehicle. The engine number or the chassis number will not change. Once the manufacturer has stamped it, that's it, it's good. But your registration number will change. The new RTO, another state may issue a different number. So think of the IP address as the RTO's registration number. Every time you change your ownership and take it to a different state, you will get another number. That's called the IP address. We won't change states here, but we'll definitely change networks. So every time we move up to a different subnetwork or a different domain, a new IP address will be given. Or in some cases, we have got this temporary IP address called dynamic host configuration, DHCP, which will issue a fresh number every time you boot up the system. Whereas the network card address, that is like your chassis number, it won't change. That's a part of your hardware. So if people have identified a machine by the IP address, then we say IP binding. But to be more secure that you cannot put a different device and use the same IP, you will be doing what is called MAC binding, MAC binding. It will take the network card address and bind it. MAC in this context standing for Media Access Control. Please keep this in mind, because as you do more and more reading on these audits, you'll have password as the first authentication, IP binding as the second authentication, and MAC binding as the ultimate authentication. So if my phone is bound on password, I can go to another phone, download the same app, use my password, it will work. If my phone number is the authentication, I go to another phone, it won't work. But if I take my SIM, put it there, it will work. But if my IMEI number is the authentication, I go to another phone, it will never work, because I can't put this IMEI number on another phone. So I think of all this. When you start reading, very few examples will be there. So you can remember these examples, it makes it a lot easier. So let's say, okay, we start here. Then we also have to look at remote users. Now this last fellow on the bottom left corner is a remote user. Now he can come through dial-up. Now in India, like I told you, in India is an advanced country now, India and China, dial-up is used, but very rarely. Only in remote places where you don't get a connection. Even then they don't use dial-up. They use the mobile phone as a hotspot and then use the computer. But it's okay. You can still use dial-up or modem, a dial-up, roll landlines. Okay, if we use that, then the telephone company is another problem. Data can leak out there also. Okay, first we got a remote access server which authenticates these modem services and picks up information. Then we have some branch offices which have their own LANs. Then we have LANs, maybe this is a Chennai based LAN, this is a Bombay LAN, Calcutta LAN, and so on. Every regional office we got some LANs. They have their own machines and servers. And then we have one set of servers which are accessible to both insiders and outsiders. The outsiders are the ones connected to the border router, the internet. Insiders are the ones connected to the internal router. Now, these DMZ servers typically will be web servers, FTP servers, mail servers, where data or mail or a browsing people can come from outside. You can post data, you can send mails, you can download mails, you can FTP files, you can post things on the web page or update it from inside. So DMZ stands for demilitarized zone. That is a place where civilians and military can walk around. The intranet is only for the military kind of, no civilian. And outside world, anybody can be there. It doesn't have to be civilians or what, they can be wild animals. They can be anybody out there. So this is the diagram based on which I'm explaining the network security. So the first one is our inadequate router access controls, where ACL stands for access control list. It is not filtering our data properly. Access control lists are like an authorization matrix where you can allow people to come in and go out, who's authorized, who's not authorized, who's authorized to do only a few things, who's authorized to do a lot of things, and so on. So that is where most of the breakdowns start with certain protocols, as internet control message protocol. Okay, let's not go deep into this, but what I'm saying is, if the internal router is not configured right, very friendly, doesn't check traffic properly, trusts all the hosts in the network, some third party sitting somewhere, this is your wireless, very easy to tap into it. So some third fellow sitting outside will tap into one of your LANs and then he's got access to the whole system. So this is the one place where the auditor starts the audit by checking whether the internal routing or the internal network control is very strong. Because if that fails, anybody can tap into your network and whatever, steal data or whatever they want. Now the second one is you have unmonitored remote access points. As I told you, these are computers that dial up and so on. But today we have devices which are called IoT. The expansion is Internet of Things. But basically these are like transducers. They're like transmitters. They are placed in agricultural fields to monitor the soil moisture in the soil. They are there on the Swiggy chaps motorcycles to monitor them for per trip insurance. They are there on so many places, many banks in their land records which they keep, that those who mortgage their title deeds for loans, they put RF tags. That also transmits information. In hotels, they use it on refrigerators and all that. When you remove items, the RF tag sends a message for billing. So there's a lot of stuff coming in. All kinds of remote places inside rooms and hotels, farmland, all kinds of places, some motorcycle going somewhere. So this is another entry point where hackers will try to enter your system. So the auditor has to assure us, or stakeholders, that yes, all these points have been suitably secured. You can't say don't use the technology, because business is growing. They do require the new technology, but we are assuring them that yes, it's safe. The third is when you go in for this trust relationships. Now, when you go for trust relationships, what happens is you will have domains and subdomains. Let's say each state office, regional office is a subdomain, all put together one domain. Now we are trusting machines across domains, and then guy gets transferred. He goes from southern domain to the eastern domain, in eastern India. Now from his domain, if he is able to take data from the southern domain, he may sell it off, he may do some mischief with it. The other example is if a fellow is transferred from, say, one department to the other, from stores is transferred to receivables, he can access not through the logins and password, that is legal. I'm talking about the illegal guys. They'll continue to access because the trust relationship is very poor and the guy is aware of it. So he'll misuse and access the old data, even though technically his password is disabled. Now this is why sometimes the older checklists, like when the guy is transferred, immediately disable his account, that is done. But then we don't know what other methods he has got to get in. If his attendance is disabled and the time and attendance biometric, he can probably still mark attendance to the that Active Directory system. So things, problem is when you have parallel systems running, too much trust in the system, this is something the auditor has to look into. Now, if you look at users with test accounts, excessive privileges, they are called privileged user PIM or PAM, privileged access management or privileged identity management. These are the administrators, the DBA, the system administrator, the DevOps administrator, all the server administrators. Different people are there. So all of them will now be having a lot of privileges. They can destroy all the data if they want. So you have to be very careful that, see, if they're not able to steal, take it out of the environment, they'll erase it. I mean, that's also vandalism. So that's also dangerous. Of course, we'll have backup copies, or we should have backup copies. So we have to check whether all these so-called administrators and supervisors and all those people with higher authority, whether they are properly secured. If my job is to do only backup of a database, I don't need any other rights. So you can restrict the administrative rights. Then we also look at what is called the software which is not patched for vulnerabilities and security patches are not applied, or the software is installed and nobody bothers to configure it. Those been there for many years. Even today, nobody bothers. When you download something into your phone, say an app, you download it, then it will say run or something, or whatever it says, you just use it. You never go to the settings. You don't go to the whatever the machine is asking. Can I use your camera? Can I use your mic? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I access your photographs? You just leave it as default. Now, I'm not talking about phones. I'm talking about regular servers. But even there, people are the same. They do not check configuration. So that's IT people are supposed to do all that, but generally they don't. So an audit should cover the initial configurations and subsequent patch management. Now, if you look at this, you will have this part where we look at the acceptable and all the security policies and settings for our LAN. Now, this LAN, unfortunately, can be a public network. Say from Madras to Bombay, lease lines are so expensive. So we just take Madras to Airtel line, they took Geo line, no problem. Only thing is make sure that everything is properly secured. Secured means they can steal the data, but they can't make sense out of it. Earlier, the concept was make sure they don't steal it. It's very difficult. So instead of going for this layer 2 tunneling and so on, you go for the encryption route, where even if the data is stolen, they can't make any sense out of it. So that's the next audit area we'll have. And then we have the, okay, now we have file and directory access permission. Again, this gets restricted. There are filing system restrictions where some people can only read, some can only maybe edit the file, some can take copies of them or initiate printouts. There has to be a lot of regulation on file accesses. Now we look at the unauthenticated services. X Windows is Unix, can ignore that. But even if you take your own Windows, you'll be opening a lot of frames, or sometimes they call them pop-up windows. That's why as a security policy, you generally disable all the pop-up windows. You don't allow them. Now somebody knows there are vulnerabilities. Of course, it's all published on the internet today. It's called a CVE, Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure. So all that data is available. People, if they have the patience to read it, they'll start exploiting it. So the auditor also has just to read it and make sure that they cannot exploit it. Then we have these passwords, which is okay, maybe to a large extent that is not a risk because you're using biometric and what you know, what you do, and what you have, and so on. And you also have dual factor authentication. So like you can log in a password and then OTP or something like that. So we have much more control here. Now this is when you have these servers working both for the outside world and the inside world. Misconfiguration on any web page script or any script for that matter. CGI is Common Gateway Interface. So what will happen now is if the configuration is not correct, people from outside will get to see what is restricted to the insiders. So we got to be careful that any DMZ server or anything which is serving both the inside and the outside world is properly secured. Then we have the firewalls and the ACLs here, almost the same things. Only thing is firewall deals with traffic. It doesn't deal with the routing. It's more checking allowed, disallowed, suspicious, and those kind of things. Firewalls will be configured. You need to go to the firewall rules. And if you are satisfied as an auditor, it's fine. Then we have to look at ports being open. What is a port? A P-O-R-T. Any service in the internet, when we say service, email is a service. It'll have a number to it, service number. It's called, so for instance, email will be 25, SMTP. Protocol is email. So port number 25. So when somebody writes the email program, it'll listen for incoming or send outgoing messages on that port, PORT, so 25. Now what we have to do is if you don't have, let's say one server is FTP server, it doesn't have email. I should not leave the email port on, or the SMTP port must be turned off. So what we are saying is keep the services running in these servers to the minimum required. All other services can be disabled. Then we have the leakage of information to these operating systems, versions of the operating system, DNS transfer, etc. A lot of information can move out from these servers and the attacker will get to know what's going on. So anyway, these are called known vulnerabilities. It's like we say inherent risk. So once you know there are known vulnerabilities, what do we do? Mitigate as far as possible, but you cannot eliminate. That may not work. And then you have the inadequate logging, monitoring, etc. These are all the logs. So we have plenty of logs which we require and which have to be scrutinized by the auditor, whoever is external, internal, IT, whatever. They have to make sure that they have properly identified and monitored all these logs. So if you look at the entire picture, this will help us to understand how the network audit has to happen. So now that we have a clear picture on the network audit part of it, I mean, these are all like, I mean, it's trying to make things easy. You can have more of this. I mean, there's a minimum. What we're looking at is the minimum. So if a network audit checklist or an audit plan included all these and the scope for each of these was written out, actually the company may be only having one internet connection. They may have a firewall, they may have small one, software based, or if a rich company, I mean bigger company, hardware based. They'll have some LAN inside, all small machines. To save money, they would put wireless. which is a bigger risk anyway. So all that will be there. The DMs at servers will not be theirs also. They will have Google Mail. They'll have some other fellow running the web page, read chap. They'll have some other chap doing some other service, FTP, Google Drive or Dropbox or something. And then they'll say, give me a certificate as part of the audit that yes, everything is fine. But we don't know what these apps are doing. So we'll have to now look at, I mean, this is okay, it's your own service, but how do we go and audit Dropbox or Google Drive? You can't. So you have to depend on certificates from the web page of Google saying that we have so-and-so security. If that conflicts with the security which is required by a regulator or an act, then you have to tell your client that is not sufficient. Because for instance, NBFCs have to have certain rules on their servers. Because you tell them they have to do all this, they hate the auditors and they go and put it in the data centers outside, cloud centers. But as usual, they'll pick the L1 vendor, the cheapest fellow. That fellow will have nothing. He will have nothing which complies with the RBI's directive. Then when you point that out, again, disputes, fights, like it's too costly, I don't make enough money, etc. But then the point is this, there is a cost of control. And generally we say if the cost benefit, if the benefit is more, have the control, benefit is less, remove the control. But there's an exception to it. If it's a question of compliance, then we cannot look at cost benefit. If the law says you have to do it, we have to do it. So that's why I've just taken this more or less as a guideline. If for a medium and small audit, if you have a plan and scope for each of these, that's more than sufficient. The execution will come, we need tools. Okay, so I'll do one thing. I'll actually thought we could have a break, maybe
Yes, sir.
17. So maybe can we start by 6:30 or 6:35?
Sure, sir. So
Okay.
we'll have a break. Sorry, you called me up. So
Yeah. No. I just wonder if the slide was appearing. No problem. So 6:30,
you will,
6:35. I'm sorry.
yeah, you let me know,
35.
sir. I'll tell then I will share my screen for a break
Yeah.
slide, so people
Okay.
know that we are in break.
So
Also,
6:35 will resume.
yeah, I'll just put it this slide and we'll resume by 6:30.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Screen visible, sir. Unmute yourself. Sir, you're not audible, sir. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I've turned off my
No, sir,
screen.
you
I'll
stop the
turn it
screen
back.
sharing. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I turned off my camera. I wrongly turned off the wrong thing, but
Okay,
I
okay.
think now the
it's
screen is
visible,
visible.
sir. Yeah, now screen is visible. You can put it in slideshows. Fine, it's visible, sir.
Now, the next thing I want to, I thank you, Selva. Next thing I want to quickly run through is we saw the construction of a network and all the possible kind of risks we have. And based on that, we can build our scope. And I mean, there's only a template kind of thing, a starting point. Maybe as we look at bigger networks, we need more. Now, the next thing is when we talk about any security, we are talking about people getting in and doing various kinds of wrong things. If you look at the Act, the IT Act, they have tried to broadly classify, but then we are forced to read the other acts also to understand more and more of detail. For instance, for the data privacy, IT Act is our starting point, but then we look at all the regulators. Then we have to look at the Consumer Protection Act, Indian Act. Then we have to look at the acts dealing with specific industries for various kinds of data. So what is happening is industry specific checklists are being are necessary now. So we have to do a little bit of research. So what I am doing is I'm trying to generalize as far as possible, but any specific industry doubt, you can mail me later or you can ask the question now, I can answer it at the end. So let's quickly look at what exactly is hacking and why should we worried about it, and why does the auditor have to give a certificate saying that reasonably, that's what is a reasonable assurance, you're hack proof. Now, the methodology is what we have filled up first. What a thief does is he first studies the subject carefully. Subject means the what he's going to rob, a bank or a railway station or whatever it is. He starts studying it. He may go there as a customer, he may go there as a work even as a security guard, whatever. He's trying to understand the system. That's exactly what footprinting is. So what thieves do is they of course tools, I'll explain the tools. They start studying a server or an organization. So if I probably put cnkindia.com, I would get some information about where the web server is. That's a website address. I'll know where the web server is and etc. But I also get some subtle information on where is the mail being hosted. From there, I can go to the mail place, wherever it is hosted. Let's say Google or Amazon or wherever it's hosted. From the mail, I can start getting information where the applications are hosted, because mail is in the DM set. Now I can start getting into the intranet. So this is, I've not done anything wrong. I'm just observing. Now you cannot stop a person who's walking up and down the beach road or somewhere. I mean, he's just footprinting, he's observing, he's noting, he's studying. Then he starts trying to find what could be wrong. Let's say it's a building. Now he's trying to see where the windows are, doors are, which would be the easiest way to escape, which would be the longest route where he could possibly escape better than the shortest route. So he's trying to get some information. Now up to this, we are okay. Scanning may be slightly intrusive, but you have non-intrusive scanning also, you have intrusive scanning. Any footprinting totally not intrusive. That is why the auditor puts up the honeypot and takes data in to see who's, supposing, same people are coming and going in same IP traffic. You get suspicious. In airports, if they see the same vehicle going in and coming out, or in a mall, if they see the same person coming in regularly, same time, they tend to identify it as a suspicious pattern. Most of your CCTV is now scanned by artificial intelligence software. They call it image processing. Now, scanning sometimes is intrusive. Intrusive means they may be putting some load on your server. Non-intrusive means they put zero load on your server. But then comes the rest of it is serious stuff. Once they start enumerating, now they're trying to find useful, useless, which is the easy points, what time your traffic is less, what time it's more. They started doing some serious work now. The rest of it is all break-in, hacking, theft, or malicious. They try to gain access. They'll gain access as a normal user or sometimes as a guest. Many sites allow a guest login. And then they will escalate their rights from a guest to a normal login, from a normal login to the administrator's login. Anyway, these are all easily possible. So, and from there they'll start doing all the cheating work. They're stealing data. Pilfering means they're stealing your data, or they're doing some. Okay, they're basically robbing something from you, or they may be putting in nuisance software also. That is also possible. Using your machines for denial of service attacks and so on. Then they start destroying the logs. Remember, I told you, wherever you do something, you get audit logs. They erase the logs, or they put false information. And then they create entry points for themselves, which they will use later, not now. They finish the first theft. Subsequent thefts or subsequent malicious events, they have created some doors so they don't have to again come through this gaining access, escalating privilege, not necessary for them. Once they do that, they're gaining access whenever they want. Second time the fellow comes, he comes straight to the trapdoor, moves and starts getting whatever data he wants. Now, if you see the pilferage part of it, if he is not able to steal what he wants, again he comes back and does some more research on which service is running. Some people put what are called decoy services. That doesn't service anything, simply be there. It's like having a cash box in your office but with no cash. The real cash will be in a bag somewhere. So then again the fellow will come back and study it. Now this is how things go wrong. So the auditor must start at the footprinting itself. So he'll always ask, is your network traffic being analyzed? I mean, the logs being maintained. They take patterns. Of course, you do a simple, so minimum data analytics. You may sort them, you may rearrange them, you may try to find occurrences, number of times the traffic is coming, any time-based patterns. Then, of course, scanning your inside software. If you have IDS, IPS, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, it will tell you. Once these two are there itself, you can throw the fellow out. But otherwise, he'll slip in, and thereafter it becomes a little difficult because you have to see all the logs of the services. You have to a fairly complex audit. I mean, you have to check all the security logs, event logs, administrative logs. A lot of logs have to be studied. So how does he actually go ahead with this? So starting from the first one, the objective is, as I told you, he's trying to find machines. And the technique he uses is all these tools like open source, who is, whatever. So all these are tools. I mean, many of them are today, you can run them on the web itself. I'll show you who is on the web. So these are the tools. But anyway, tools can change. You may have your own set of tools, or you may use internet-based tools. They're free, of course. Or you may have things like Kali Linux or some suite of tools. Or if you're working in an organization, the company will have a paid software like Nessus or something that they'll buy. It's an expensive subscription-based software. So it depends. Some of the clients, the large clients say we don't allow open source software in our office. But what happens is the mixed up between freeware, shareware, and open source. Anyway, that's okay. We leave the clients off. But you can work with anything you want. Open source is as good as the paid ones. So nothing wrong. Freeware and shareware, be careful. Open source, no problem. The next is your scanning part of it. That's when you want to do the assessment of what is really available. What does this server have? What is the software application data? What does it have? Then for use, you have some techniques here. You got ping and so on. And then you use the tools, this FP ping, whatever, this bitmap, nmap, Nmap has become very powerful now, so it's not the old Nmap anymore. You can use Nmap. It's quite powerful. The next one is enumeration. Thereafter, it becomes theft. I mean, it's basically, if you catch the fellow, you can prosecute him. Okay, the more intrusive probing begins now. You want to find who are all the users, the legal users, what file rights do they have, what are all the applications, etc. Now it becomes a serious stuff. Now, one of the reasons why certain wants the incident to be reported within 6 hours is certain gives the list of URLs to be blacklisted to all the organizations who have registered with them. So they identify the hackers who are troublesome or causing trouble, so the others can block the URLs. Now they depend a lot on public telling them. But what happens is, except in the government, in private industry, what happens is when you have an incident, if it is not legally reportable, you tend to cover it up because there's a reputation risk. There are so many risks. If suppose a bank goes and says we got hacked, account holders won't be happy. Suppose if Lifestyle says we got hacked, I mean their customers are not going to be happy. So that's why sometimes they don't report. So the government is now saying mandatorily within 6 hours, if you don't report, you are punishable. Of course, they're asking 72 hours. They didn't say we will not report, but they're asking for a slightly bigger window. But anyway, the point is this. The point is the Indian government is also, we are having a lot of cyber attacks. Not all becomes crime, but we have cyber attacks. So the government is also stepping up the pressure now. Now, once you got enough data, then you get in, you got eavesdropping, you got a lot of things to do, and there are a lot of tools available. Only thing is, whatever tool a hacker uses, the same tool the auditor will also use. There's no difference, except that auditor does it for a good reason, and hackers do it for wrong reasons. They're bad people, auditors are good people, but the tool is the same. Now, this is the confusion many auditors have. Should I buy something? I mean, even from simple analysis, they want to buy something. It's costly. ACL, IDM. Big firms can afford it. Small firms cannot. You can use any open source. If you use Power BI open source, it's as good as using ACL or IDM. Similarly, if you use NAT or Logon or Kali Linux or any of those, they're as good as Nessus and any of those paid software which you are using. So next is when you want to escalate your privileges. Now what you're doing is moving from a guest login or an average user login to a more powerful login, administrator login, super user login, and so on. So that is when you'll have this. There's actually John the Ripper and lots of software is there, but these consume a bit of memory power, right from gaining access. You'll have to start. That's why I said if you can practice the desktop. Only thing, don't hack your customer sites, or there are sites where you are allowed to practice hacking. You can use those sites. Okay, don't hack into somebody's real server. Go to those sites where they allow you to practice your hacking skills. There's a hack box, and some sites are there. Send it to your students. Ask them to try it out there. You can try it out there. That's why a desktop, it doesn't heat up fast also. So if you're pushing it to the maximum also, it will work. And then you have the information gathering, which again needs a lot the tools which consume a lot of power, because what they are now doing is they're getting you not just passwords, they're actually stealing data. They are, when you say pilfer means you're like shoplifting, so the guys are stealing maybe passwords, credit card numbers, or they may be actually stealing admission data or some insurance data. Whatever they want to steal, I mean, they're doing it. And then comes the covering of the tracks. Now, this is where the auditor will inform the customer, client, not to have standard logs, but to have the logs in a different secure server or in a third party, they have third parties whose BPO services where they maintain these logs, or they put the logs in some unknown directory which only the IT people and the auditor know. So if you leave it in the default location, they'll immediately erase it. So you have to be careful here. The tools are available for that. Then you create trapdoors. Now creating trapdoors is very, very easy because now you're an administrator. All you have to say is this particular login or I'm a super user. You create one super user account which bypasses all the PIM and PAM and whatever these companies use. You get direct access to it. Only thing is, as an auditor, if you're allowed, the first two should be done correctly. Otherwise, if the damage or the disaster has gone beyond a point, then the statutory auditor, see, nobody may know about this. How will you know if somebody is stealing, say you got, let's say you got a 100-liter can of petrol or something, every day they're stealing 1 liter. You got 99 liters, you may not even notice it. But by the time you noticed it, these fellows have found a perfect system to steal that 1 liter petrol. So then the whole thing, the rectification starts from the top. You have to start putting in your firewall rules, IDS, IPS, encryption, passwords, biometric, multi-factor authentication, a whole lot of stuff has to start, logs, everything. And then when they come to this last one, details of services, now this fellow will now start damaging your services. You can have denial of service, you can have cross-site scripting, you can do a lot of things where you can either control the service or you can stop it, leading to complete business disruption. Not just reputation risk, it's a major disaster. As you have seen in the NSC case, it was a man-made disaster. Of course, I'm not blaming any auditor, but if somebody had done some work here, whenever a machine stops, a thorough audit is required. It's like a aircraft investigation. Why did it happen? How did it happen? They would have found out a human being was behind it. But anyway, I will leave that. But I'll take that as an example to tell you that by stopping and starting services, they were able to carry out transactions which were not supposed to be done. So anyway, now we know something about all this. If we find out at this point, like our NSC, that's the worst audit. That's the most difficult audit observation. 1 and 2 safest audit observation. So if you look at this, you'll get a clear picture. I suggest you can photograph these. Only thing, the tools on the right side, you can update them. We got web-based tools. These are all Unix-based tools. You can go for Windows-based tools. I mean, nothing wrong. See, we are auditors. We are not network engineers and security experts. If you take up consulting, then of course you have to study all these tools. Because I know many auditors who know accounting standards, but do not know the journal entry associated with it. So that's okay. We don't need real roots. We need to know at least how to get the job done. That much this will see us. So what I will do is at this point, if I can just go to the browser, I'll just open a new window. And I'm trying to demonstrate this. Who is a command. Okay, I'm going to do this as a online command, so I don't have to do much work. Okay, I just open some random site. It's okay. Now it'll ask me for a domain name or an IP address. So I'm typing my company's name. So it immediately tells me my IP address is so and so. But then if I come further down, okay, this I think is going to ask for money, so we'll go to another free one. Okay, now I'm typing the same thing here. I'm typing the only thing is when you play with these tools, play with only safe addresses. I mean, do it very carefully. Don't put your customer sites or bank sites or something like that. Okay. For instance, it says this is the record. They registered it this in GoDaddy, and they got some dates. I mean, when did they register first? When was it last updated, etc. These are all the server names. You will get your IP address. Obviously, it's not here. If this fellow has got a server somewhere in another country. Then they have got the IP history. There were 12 changes so far in the last 18 years. And they had 3 registrars. Of course, Net for India collapsed in India. So one big problem we had. Okay, that's okay, fine. And then they have SSL doesn't work for them. And they've got all the details from the registry, including whom to contact and what to do and so on. Anyway, right now, I just did this as a small example. You can put whatever yahoo.com or your company's name.com. You will get a lot of information. That information, if you are trying to do something more, you will be able to run this through tools which will actually get you the route. It's called trace route. You can use visual trace route. A lot of things are available. Today I'm not demonstrating too much because we need a controlled environment. Actually, I'm not in the network. I'm at home, so just say we can go around to other networks. But what happens is any demonstration, I usually end up with complaints. I think not you. I mean, talking about regular college students, they'll go and hack some known server or the college's own server. So anyway, I know you're all responsible. So please use these on public domain, or there are sites where you're actually allowed to learn, not learn, test your hacking skills. It's not tutorial. They have servers, you can log into it, like the hack box and all that. And they'll give it's like a challenge. You'll have to do something. That's okay for auditors. That's fine for us to learn. So now I'll take you through the various tools we need to manage all these, whatever we explained. Now, one of the difficult jobs is on this threat part. Reconnaissance is like footprinting, scanning, and enumeration to a small part is all reconnaissance, including whether my environment, say I may be behind somebody else's network. I might have subscribed in such a way that my data center is behind, let's say, IBM's data center, and IBM is very strong. I'm hiding behind that. So I need to know the exact environment. Of course, as an auditor, you want it for legal reasons. In the audit charter, you got right to everything, people, data, etc. But if I'm a thief, obviously I have no rights. I do it stealthily. I do it secretly. But as an auditor, if you know what a hacker or how a hacker does it, you are a good auditor. After that, nobody can stop you from learning information about the client. So here we have common tasks. Like one is we need to do the network discovery. So we need a tool like Nmap or ZenMap. Operating system we can get from the OS versions, a lot of software. What services are running? This we usually run as a TCP port scan, you will get it. But of course, you have to do another UDP port scan. Nessus will give it to you straight away. Then capturing packets, you can use Wireshark or any of those. Then say log reviews, of course, we are using Excel and Power BI, but we try using R and Python because that's the in thing now. Otherwise, they all do a good job. Then for machine learning, you better use a language because there's no point really learning machine language. Maths of it is already programmed. Just use the tool. Then router, firewall, access controls, a manual review. You need to do that configuration review. Then email harvesting is again, it's basically data analytics for patterns. Social media profiling, it's called a social media audit. You can pull out the data from social media, but you'll have to prepare a graph database. And then those common, where the traffic is high, you'll get thick lines. Like they used to do work and motion study in costing, put a string diagram, something similar to that. Social engineering, of course, you have to do mystery shopping. DNS harvesting is domain name service. Actually, you can do it with any basic tool. If you first you have to find the DNS server, which will be the router in your house or office, and from there you can move out. Phishing is when you have false websites, a little difficult. Then variables, this we can do all the wireless, etc. This Wireshark will do it, and these are all the tools which you can use for these. Feel free to use online tools. I just showed you who is. There are a lot of tools like that. You can use any tool you want. Only thing, I mean, use the tool carefully. I mean, responsibly. Then to analyze the results of this, again, whatever packets we got, the protocols we got, actually you can buy online, not from India but from overseas. China is banned now, but you can buy it from Europe around 2,000 rupees. We get a packet analyzer. It used to be 5 lakhs at one time, the big box. Today it's a small plug-in into the USB port. It analyzes all the wireless traffic in your office or home or roadside, and from there you can, if people are not encrypting their passwords, you can pick up passwords. Anyway, I'm just trying to tell you this because sometimes people tell us that it's all encrypted. Auditor doesn't know how to check. You'll only check SSL certificate. That is encryption for data in transit. It's only a kind of encryption for the data. But this password happens before the session starts. Hotmail, if you see, they'll have encryption for the password, login. After that, they are unsecured. That is, okay, in a way, that's a correct procedure. But if the password and login is unsecured, only the data transmission is secured. Auditor cannot give a certificate saying it is safe. Okay, all this traffic analysis, density, net flow, whatever, all this. Data correlation also. This you have to do a bit of statistical analysis. SPSS was a good tool, but now it's owned by IBM. It's very expensive, so don't pirate it. Instead, use an opposite free source, open source tool called SPSS is now PSPP. You can use PSPP for your statistical analysis. It's open source. That's the same job. Then you get all these logs, whatever. These are the tools you'll be using. SIM is now built into most of the ERPs, or most of the firewalls also have it. Packet analyzers, we can use software, but I told you, if you're using the plugin tool, it's easy. Otherwise, you can use Wireshark or any tool. Then all these sniffers, IDS, IPS, etc. NetFlow analyzer. There are a lot of these tools. I mean, you can just check on the internet. There are necessarily new ones also, because I'm more on the Unix side. Windows side, you have a lot of these interactive tools. Then we have threat, implement, recommend, whatever, network based. We need to know the segmentation, how it's isolated, because see, they'll give you a drawing. The drawing will be like, once I'm showing you all pictures. Some firewall will be like a wall, server will be like a box, and so on. That's not a real correct diagram, because if you really want to know all the devices in the network, run your own Nmap or any kind of tool which analyzes the devices. Then ask them to mark against each device what is that server. The IP addresses will come. Servers only, clients you can leave off. Clients you may have to check if it is like people bring their own mobiles, they bring their own laptops, they bring your own device. If they are allowed to go into the office network with own devices, but otherwise you can ignore the workers and the PCs. Just stay with the servers, and then you will find unknown servers. Numbers are there, the IT people don't know. Those usually end up being third-party devices. The internet fellow will come and fix one router, he'll disappear. Another fellow, some other chap comes, he fixes some IoT receiver, that fellow disappears. So there are a lot of these unknown devices, IoTs, these LAN people, wireless people, internet people, this PABX people. A lot of people come and plug in their own hardware, and we don't take it into our inventory, I mean the company's inventory. And any backdoor, trapdoor, default password there will cause trouble. Okay, then we have the jump boxes, bastion holes. These are all in your network. And these group policies are not actually written policies. These are configured in the system. this group can do this group can do that, and so on. So once you have gone through all this, you'll need to use some tools there. Best is Nmap, but it's become very huge now. You can read about it. Kali Linux, you can use one of those. Otherwise, some Windows tools. Well, I'll find them, and if you really have to do a Windows-based audit, I'll send it to you. What I'm saying is, you can use a Linux machine with Linux tools to do an audit of a Windows network. But in some companies, they'll say, no, we won't allow your machine to be plugged into our network. We will give you one of our machines. Then you have to run your tools. Even then, no problem. You have this boot up. Now it's USBs. Earlier, it used to be that CD. Now, pen drive is enough. You got Hiren CD, HIREN. You can look up on the internet. It gives you all the tools. You put in a USB ISO image, boot that machine, and start working. But there are some companies which say no USB also, only legal tools, that too their IT department is clear, only those you can use. Be very suspicious. That means the IT department is not confident of a strong audit. They are scared. That's why I tell the client, okay, we'll do this, whatever cyber audit from outside. You're not coming inside. So the IT department has no fear. Outside, if you do, most of it will collapse. So please be careful. The more they are resisting you, the more less confident, the more fearful they are. They're scared. I'm not blaming anyone, but that's everybody has to survive. So auditors also have to survive. So we have to be smarter than them. So this is all on the testing part. So penetration testing is all the vulnerabilities you want to exploit. You want to exploit all this authorization, etc., reporting. Reverse engineering is when you take the software code and try to bring it back into the form of diagrams. Some case tools will do it. So what they do is they encrypt the code itself, program code. Java can do that, C can do that. You can't undo that code, you can't reverse it, which is good. But sometimes what happens is you have a dispute with the supplier. That fellow creates a problem, no escrow properly. Then you want to know what the old software was doing. Unfortunately, cannot debug the whole thing. So then it becomes a real nightmare. Once it becomes a nightmare, then huge problems. So anyway, just keep these in mind. So they have something called purple teams, white teams, red teams, whatever. So we have to form. Now, when it comes to vulnerability management, okay, the slide's got a lot of stuff. Okay. Now, some companies say, because now the IRDA's statement, if you see, and for certain businesses, from certain regulators, you have to do a vulnerability assessment also. Not penetration test is you check the whether the vulnerability can be exploited. But this they say no, you have to first give us the list of vulnerabilities and then do the penetration. Otherwise, find 100 vulnerabilities, you'll take only 50, penetrate the 50 and say they're strong. The other 50 will get left out. So they're also getting smart. So one is we must know what are the requirements, what is the regulatory environment, what is the corporate policy, data classification. All these are not technical, and these are all legal. Now, for instance, what is identification requirements, the audit charter, okay, fine, scope. But then if the wording there says, as per somebody's rules or whatever, now we have to go and read those rules now. So we must know whether they are capable of doing what we are saying, or whatever we are doing is according to them. Corporate policies, of course, that the company get overruled, because compliance obviously will overrule the policy. You have to tell them to change the policies. Then data classification, still gray area, we go by the IT Act. But when you go to fintech companies, like say they're doing something for the bank, for the medical industry, they call it medtech. RegTech, of course, is only regulatory, but in InsurTech, if you're working with e-auction engines, direct selling agents, loan evaluation engines, then a little gray area on this data classification. Who is responsible for the KYC documents? What happens? We're not talking about credit card. That is governed by the PCI DSS standard. We're talking about the normal stuff. In India, everybody's got tons of paper. You need Aadhaar card, PAN card, this card, bank account. Something leaks out, something goes wrong, what happens? Asset inventory is not just the hardware, it's the software, licenses, renewable, one-time, life, purchase software, maintain software. And the guidance note on the CA Institute, from the CA Institute, says that if you have SAP, your licenses could be in crores. They say you have to expense it off every year. An SAP license cannot be capitalized. I find in many companies the SAP cost has been capitalized. Please go through our institute guidance notes also. So it's a bit of work. So it's like any other audit work is involved. Then of course you have all the scanning frequencies. You just set the tool, it'll keep doing it regularly. Like what you studied in the old ITF, SCARF, integrated test facility and so on. Then, okay, this configuring tools, etc. And what is your scanning criteria that we set? Okay, then what are the updates, plugins, and how do we interpret those reports we are getting, and how do we test? And then we also have to look at all the MOUs, SLAs, etc. And okay, the easiest examples here in the public domain are banks, because banks have to publish their balance sheets. They have to give their risk and whatever statements. There will be a risk committee somewhere. But along with that, you have to read Basel III, and you have to read operational risks, not just the financial market credit, not those risks. That is for a hardcore accountant. Where the assurance is on the cybersecurity side, read the Basel III operational risks. That will be helpful for us to understand what we are saying. Other industries are not so rigid. Fintech, yes, very rigid. Insurance, all financial, medical, and wherever we have this confidential data, like, but they're all in the government, land records, population records, Aadhaar cards, they're all with the government. So unless you got one of those audits, but then that will be subject to further audit by the CAG. So I have to be a little careful there. Then we also take a scenario, analyze output from a vulnerability scan. We look at those results. Then we have to see whether that, suppose there's a window, I break it. But after I break the window, there are heavy metal bars inside. That is good enough for security. So just because I could break the window doesn't mean it's a penetrable vulnerability. So we have to be careful when ports are open, connections are loose, some handshake is negotiated. It doesn't mean immediately everything is unsafe. First of all, if I don't encrypt, what will happen? I'm not sending anything on it. Probably I'm only sending some basic useless data which doesn't help anyone. So I also have to see what data goes on that line, and will a failure of encryption be critical? So that's how you have to look at your vulnerability reports and penetration reports. Then whatever you have to now put them, kind of tabulate them. Was the vulnerability in the servers? We said about hardening documents and so on. Endpoints are the PCs. So normally we say today go for diskless nodes or try to go on for remote booting. They're all available now. Olden days, Novel Network was there. Same thing was there. Now it's all come back now. Those micro PCs, small ones, diskless, they're all back. Plus we got these phones, tablets, etc. They're all endpoints, and now we have devices, no keyboards, like IoTs and transducers and video cameras and so on. The network infrastructure, I told you, is a very difficult part. You'll be using public network facilities. Of course, you have to ensure their safety. Then network appliances. This is where the firewalls, IDS, IPS, which were software and still are software, but you can buy them as a box. Cisco, so many companies are there. You can just buy it as a box, plug it into your system. It will be it's called UTM, Universal Threat Management. It's a firewall. It's a load balancer. It also does the IPS, IDS. It scans your email. It does all your web scanning or scrubbing. But only problem, after 4 or 5 years, the company will say, we don't support this model anymore. then you have to go buy a new model and pay annual subscription. Otherwise, they won't update the virus scanner. We are having all these issues. India is now I won't say rich country, but everything is affordable. So companies are going with appliances. So if you find an appliance whose active support period is over, put this in your audit report straight away. You cannot update it. There is no upgrade for it. Then virtual infrastructure means you don't own it. It's outside. Like we have infrastructure as a service, software as a service. Almost everything is as a service now, including scrambling and one-time key generation for these movies. When you distribute these movies, they have to put a key to unlock it for the views. Otherwise, you can't play it on your projector. That is also generated by some third party. No idea who he is also. They'll say some Australian company, some New Zealand company. So the virtual infrastructure is becoming a big problem. We don't know where it is, what it is also. Virtual hosts, same problem, cloud servers. Virtual networks, okay, management interfaces. Okay, all these, if you just go through this list, you'll find industrial control systems and SCADA. Today it's used widely in manufacturing industries for picking up all this machine information, or in power plants for this meter reading from different windmills and solar panels. But if you go to some of the better hospitals or the richer hospitals, they put sensors on the ICU, they put sensors all over the human, and that gets processed. Now, I will give you an example. One of the hospitals in Madras, Desert Listed Hospital, you can put an app on your mobile phone. Now, let's say you're alone, you're an old person and you fell down. The rate at which your phone fell will immediately indicate it was a fall and you didn't keep it on the table. It's able to send some information and immediately the ambulance comes, they pick you up, whatever. Sounds good. But then look at a wearable, a watch. Now it's become cheap also. Those watches are synced to an app in your phone, and that phone is on the internet or somewhere, so it can send out information. Now this hospital, and in fact IRDA has got a subcommittee for wearables alone, where your premium will reduce if you use wearables. So once you use wearables, what happens is it's not just falling down. Now it's blood pressure. Apple watches can also check your sugar. It checks the sweat and they're able to read the sugar. So I'm sure even your 1,000 rupee watch will do it after some time. So they're able to check your sugar level, blood, whatever, your oxygen. Okay, so many things they can check. It informs the app informs the hospital. Now what I'm trying to say is, when you have too many of these SCADA and all these nice IoTs and so on, you'll have to go back to the earlier point somewhere where we spoke about corporate policy, data classification, security, privacy. All those words are not here, but that's what the law says. We have to be careful as an auditor when we say yes, we are assuring of cybersecurity. How does this data move in and out? Will it get stolen? Will a competing hospital be able to pirate the patient or rather hijack the patient? So all those things we need to look at. Anyway, fortunately, the IRDA, everything is on the website. You can go and see it. But the private hospitals are not on the website. Their technology part, actually, it's called telemedicine. They'll be using DICOM protocols. It's called telemedicine. We got some of the majors doing it, Ramchandra, Apollo, so on. So you can, I don't know, you may have an insider, you'll get to know it. Otherwise, just go to some foreign hospital, you'll get the details. Now we also have to distinguish the threat data, etc. Threat classification. One is we know there's a threat. But when a new virus or a new problem creeps in, before they're able to detect it, the antivirus companies and people responding to the incident, usually there's a 24-hour lag. Usually. Sometimes it may be less, but definitely it will be 24 hours usually. Within that time, a few critical systems will get attacked. Now that is called a 0-day attack, which means from, they call it T+1, etc. T+0 means same day. T+1 means next day. Same day when the virus was released, before they can find a solution, T+1 average, typical time, damage can be caused to systems. So they are using artificial intelligence, actually it's called machine learning based software to detect things which look like viruses, but the signature is not matching any known virus. This can be done from online also. That means your firewall is online. It's a software as a service. Some of the larger companies have decided to go with that because even one-day damage is pretty expensive for them. Now the auditor's problem is he has to make sure that that outsourced fellow has got everything running and his machine learning etc. is doing its job properly. Right now it is offered by only a few companies like IBM, and one of the companies is using an IBM solution. But IBM is very secretive because my guess is they themselves don't know what they have. IBM is very big. They have hundreds of teams working on one project, and a team may have hundreds of people. No single documentation available. So we just take a certificate from them. Don't know if it is legally, if it will stand the test, but right now it's a certificate. But slowly auditors will have to learn machine language to understand these kind of software. Okay, then we have to look at what is the severity and the prioritization, so we know how much will get impacted, how long your systems will be down. Ransomware was one of the big downtime kind of headaches, and recovery time, etc., and so on. So if you have mirroring, for instance, and a damage took place, somebody ruined your first copy, because you're 100% mirror, the second copy is also ruined. So that is why we say, industry suggests take mirroring is fine, all that is fine, replication is fine, but also keep some backup which is a day old. So if you know something happened, at least up to the last previous day's data is intact. Of course, there's a lot of rebuilding to be done, but that happens. Then we also have what is the type of data. Now remember, these I've just put generally, not from IT Act, but reading out different acts. Is this identifiable information? The biggest is Aadhaar, passport, bank, PAN, and some more numbers are there. Okay, list I'll give. Then personal health information. Now it's getting important because of wearables, and IRDA has come out with a lot of rules on this. Payment card, of course, is PCI DSS. Intellectual property is all under. We have got an ancient act called patent, trademark, copyright. We still haven't moved beyond that, but slowly we are moving because music is online, books are online, movies are online. Indian Cinematograph Act, as they put a few sections there to take care of this digital transmission, all that. Then corporate confidential, of course, the SEBI, only for listed companies. Non-listed, nothing, no rules. Accounting data, no rules at all. So except the income tax, which says that books of account and GST, of course, they say whatever IT Act permits, we'll take as books of account. Mergers and acquisitions, when systems are brought together, we use some kind of a tool like Cognos or Jasper or some tool to merge, take data from different systems. But if you saw the sometime back when all the banks were merged, they must they must have had a lot of experts doing a lot of homework. Still, they blundered. When they merged the systems, customers' IFSC codes got into a mess, and those who had registered and linked their bank accounts with salary accounts and income tax refunds and etc., they all had a tough time. And when this phone company closed up, all the people had linked their phone number with the other services which they are using, they had a tough time. So even we have large examples in India that closure of this phone and merger of the banks, not mentioning any auditors or government regulators, but it was not properly looked into. So the impact of that incident was huge. India, nobody sues anybody, so everybody got away. But suppose all the bank customers sued and all the phone customers sued. Think of the lawsuits and the kind of money which would have been payable. Anyway, this is an example, but okay, we may not have those things happening again. Then we also have these various toolkits. We have forensic kits. All these are just tools, software or checklists. Now, write blockers also you can buy. Amazon.com you can buy. But what I say is don't buy it. If you have to do a forensic audit, you want to do risk imaging, there are write blockers which are downloadable. Download it into the USB drive. Don't touch the other machine. Download a USB drive, plug in the USB drive, run the forensic toolkit, FTK or whatever, and then that will work as a write blocker. Basically, what it does is it doesn't allow you to damage the original hard disk. It only make an image of it. All these cables, drive adapters, it cost a lot of money. Minimum it will start at 8,000, goes on. They are paying dollars. So I suggest you can work with, but you have to get used to working with ISO images on USB drives. Then of course we have all these tamper-proof seals and all these. Whatever we are using in a forensic environment, like tools like NCase or forensic toolkit, same thing only we are talking. That's why I told you hacker, forensic, thief, whatever, all and auditor. Basically, the tools are all the same. Only intentions are different. Thief comes before the auditor, auditor comes after the thief. But if the auditor comes before the thief and strengthens the system, obviously thief will not come. So that's what we have to do. Then the chain of custody, all these analysis utilities, they're all part of sometimes legal, sometimes and also another thing is if you have to do anything on the forensic side, it means legal. Actually, we have misnamed the course as forensic. It only is investigation audit. Forensic means you must bring it to the Indian Evidence Act, Bankers Book Evidence Act, etc. It must stand two things. One, test of evidence as per the law. Second, the cross-examination of a lawyer. If it fails both, then it's not evidence. Okay, then we have this incident response. So the stakeholders are all the different departments. Okay, whatever it is. And we have to make sure that whoever has to receive the information gets it. Now, for instance, here we have limiting communication to trusted parties. That's called notification directory. But if there is a legislative or law requirement, you have to tell certain. I mean, certain we don't trust. I mean, I'm not saying you should trust certain, but if the law says you have to tell them, you have to tell them. Then preventing accidental release of information. This happens all the time. You can see the British Post Office case. You can see the problem with India is we don't report most of our breaches. That is the problem. But that's okay. I mean, maybe it's a cultural issue. Then we have this responsibilities, etc. And law enforcement. We have some lot of departments starting from the cyber crime in the police department. If you go to the websites, if you're getting a malicious call and you know it's a thief, you noted down the number because he called you on the mobile. You try to register a complaint. The latest thing the central government site says is, if you lost money, get a certificate from the banker and then file the complaint. If you have not lost money, you just click here. If you click there, it's just giving a standard list. Don't answer these phone calls. Don't click at a attachment. I mean, useless. So law enforcement is not keeping pace. So auditors will have a tough time because you'll have to find out. You can't depend on law enforcement too much. But anyway, maybe they'll also catch up soon. Okay, then if you're doing a kind of audit, cyber audit, you select a scenario. Scenarios are like exercises, but in real life you can't do that. You have to work with your scope and objective. So common network related symptoms, you check for all these. See if you're having heavy traffic consumption. That means somebody is using your machine to attack someone else. See, even in a big forum, we have seminars. Somebody came and said, we have found some hacking, then we traced it to a university in Austria. Probably the university in Austria never hacked. A thief has planted software in that large computer in that university and using that to hack other people. So you'll have to go beyond the first where your ping has stopped. You have to go beyond it. So it's a lot of work actually. But anyway, we'll learn as we go ahead. Rogue devices, that's what I was talking about. Then we have common host-related symptoms, CPU heating up, etc. Unauthorized code, unauthorized processes. So CPU can also be monitored. There are tools to do that. Then application, of course, is the easiest because by now auditors have become comfortable with this ITAC, IT audit. Okay, IT application control review. And they're also using those old tools like SCARF and ITF and so on, embedded audit software. So they are reasonably comfortable on the application side, but still go through the coding security. For mobile software, you can use a tool called BURP, B-U-R-P. That is a reasonable open source tool for work. So all these with sometimes checklist, sometimes software, we can manage these audits. So once you whatever you need to do, you have done summarized, then of course you have to do what's called the containment techniques, is stop the event from spreading. So normally we say isolate the machine. For suppose a server, we say take it offline. But then you must have a fallback server, a DR, something to take care of your routine business. Then eradication, of course, then the second process, you have to clean up, remove, maybe completely format things, or do some cleaning up activity to bring it back to normal operations. Then lessons learned is what, it's a bit of research. So usually the reports go to the government, it goes to the police, it goes to the SIRC, it goes to a lot of people. Private companies also like Reuters, Bloomberg, they also do some work on this. So they keep understand many antivirus companies. They also collect this information. So they do some research. And of course, there are universities which do a lot of research. So, and from there, we not just finding a solution for the problem, but doing a root cause analysis and probably getting rid of that facility altogether. This would be like hidden tracks on a hard disk, maybe master boot record infiltration. A lot of work goes on. So today our systems are more secure than they were long ago. But unfortunately, thieves also keep learning new things. So they're able to break in, and sometimes we see news reports like there's a vulnerability in your Chrome. Don't panic, because see, the Chrome may have vulnerabilities, but what is the useful thing? We do nothing. We are browsing, studying, doing something, accounts. Nothing major will happen. But if it's suppose say a shipping site and you're doing the AIS, that's for the shipping location, then that fellow is interested, the hacker is interested in that kind of data. So that's why we say that you have to prioritize and you have to classify the problems before you move ahead with solutions. Okay, now we can quickly run the tool sets and frameworks. We got a lot of frameworks. NIST, you already know, National Institute of Standards and Technology, ISO, we know. COVID is from ISACA. In the SAP, TOGAF, ITIL, these are all frameworks for service companies, BPOs. COPC is missing here, but you can add that if you want. That's another framework, COPC. Then policies, of course, you can go to SANS, SANS, and just put SANS policies. They give you the download for templates. They give you the download in PDF and Word. You can use them for your client requirements. Then controls are based on criteria. Procedures, how do you do it? Continuous monitoring, evidence production, batching, compensating, control, testing, etc. This is normal audit requirements. Certification is only if you're complying with any of these frameworks. We have more frameworks. We also have the ITAF. We have got a lot of frameworks are there. In fact, GRC frameworks are also there now. So depending on the certification, but you have to pass some exams before we can issue the certificate, or do the preparatory work and get some qualified person to do the final audit and sign off. Okay, this is for the remediation thing. So we have with context-based authentication on time, location, frequency, etc. So these are security issues. So for instance, let's say we have accidents in a particular location. We can take the geo locations for these accidents and we can start working on them. Then we will probably find out somebody has hacked the traffic light sequence to do something wrong. I mean, all hackers, mostly they will be vandals. Vandals means doing things for the fun of it. But there are hackers who are serious, robbing, stealing, making money out of it. So one category now that in between these two fellows, the fellows who do it for fun, with things like this ransomware and so on, they don't steal anything from you, but they want you to pay them to put your system restore your data or release the lock on the data. So we are getting all kinds of problems now. So this is one. Then if it's associated with people or with equipment, then this needs a different solution, easier to solve. If it's associated with where we are storing things like these are all names of services, remote authentication and so on. We have a lot of these services now, including Active Directory. We have to take care the repositories are not one of the two things, damaged or stolen. Both are a problem. If it's associated with federation and single sign-on, that is what you're doing is you have one password or one authentication to allow a person to work with a lot of systems, then we have to be careful. Usually they use ADS, Active Directory, single sign-on, or some third-party authentication is also available. The exploits, of course, these are all the techniques that the tapping traffic, that's man in the middle, session hijacking, you log in, then somebody takes off your login. They get into your web pages with cross-site scripting. They also do SQL injection. They do all kinds of things. So, what is this slide trying to say? What it says is identify the issue, and in your audit, we call it observation. Try to bring it into some group. Is it people? Is it equipment? Is it software? Is it with the authentication? Is it with some vulnerabilities in your system? And then try to, if you're a statutory auditor, of course, your report will say high risk. But if you're an internal auditor, you may have to work with the auditor's recommendation, implication. Those things also you'll have to work with. Then reviewing of securities, all the data analytics. I suggest you start with, you can use Excel also, no problem. You can start Power BI, you can start slowly looking at it. Desktop version is free. For the first time, Microsoft has got something free, so you can use it. Then you can move to 9 and other open source stuff. Tableau is paid, but again, Tableau Cloud is free. Then you have all these logs, and reading logs itself is an art. It's a whole lot of stuff. So generally, you can use software for reading, then slowly try to read the log, because you can maybe over time you'll start using Python or R or something to analyze these logs. Then defense in depth is all kinds of hacker techniques which are basically concealed. Like for instance, a switch to switch, you may have it's called a trunk line. On the trunk line, you might have split domains, subdomains. But this fellow can actually go and put one domain user onto another domain. Let's say he's got the get security password. He can actually put himself onto the finance domain and maybe authorize an enough transfer or something. So they have to study. This is actually this study will actually be, if you are doing this, I suggest you go to YouTube, do a quick course on, better if you do a course, but okay, if it's feasible, do it on YouTube, otherwise do the regular course. Learn networking security first, then get into this, so that will be easier. Then personnel, of course, we have all the people, training, awareness, etc. In fact, this is covered in IFC itself. Defense in-depth related processes, this continual improvement, etc. is also part of the internal auditor's role, where he brings value addition to the organization. Then technology, automated reporting, etc. Security as a service has come to India now. Means it has come already, but now the medium-sized clients have started using it because it saves money. No data center, no operator, no administrator, nothing required. You just pay the money subscription. Your IP is linked to that, and you're getting the protection. It's like a Netflix or Hotstar, you can see it on your phone, you can see it on your tab, you can find it works wherever you want. So then we have, okay, network design, but if you're doing this more in detail, before you rush up to the any other security, network security will be helpful. Okay, then in SDLC, we may not do that unless you are auditing a software company, because today very few companies are developing their own software. They're just buying it. So the companies which develop software have no idea about most of these regulations the auditor is talking about. So they hire an auditor. Usually it's a consulting arrangement where you have to step in and help them out. Okay, but not everybody does that. Some of them feel there's no need for it. Okay, then what is the best practice? Security for all this. Then code analysis. You need to run tools. Then web vulnerability scanning, which is also done before release. Then interception proxies to crawl applications. This basically happens on network worm kind of attacks. Then you have the manual peer reviews. That's was humans doing it. User acceptance. This UAT is done first by themselves. Then they use test users. I'm not talking about a company developing their own stuff. It will fail all these tests. These are software companies. And then use best practices from various people and system design recommendations. So this is a more difficult area, though the points are less. You are helping someone design and develop the software with all these security parameters, along with the logic and user interface and all the facilities and the good things. You also want the security part to be built in. I mean, this is more detailed. Then you have all these other tools, the names of all the cyber security tools. You can either photograph this slide or you can go to the net. You can work, but my general suggestion is buy a old desktop. It'll all be working condition desktops. Nobody wants them now. So you can start putting dual boot Windows and Unix and start learning. So, and I can demonstrate some of these commands, but it's best is if you learn. Don't attack any other system. That's the only advice I can give you now. Okay, I would say don't do it. Learn and do it. Use it for your client. Because I have students who keep hacking into the professor's accounts, and all headaches will be having. This is another slide. Also, tools can use this also. In fact, we use FTK in case it's paid. Generally, we use all the open source. Our clients are medium and small, so no problem with them. But large clients make such a fuss, so usually we'll put the trial version, that 30-day version, 14-day version. But you have to finish the audit within that time and close the audit and walk away. Okay, this I'll just skip this part. That's my email. Now I can just go to your questions. If you want, I can just demonstrate. Quickly, I'll just demonstrate at least one or two commands. So okay, if you go into a command prompt, which is this black box here, and I'll just increase the size of the font. So I told you that we have some commands as ping, and if I put yahoo.com something, then it gives you some results. I'm just using one example. Now, what is this result? How do I interpret it? So when it pings this yahoo.com and it's pinging from the address, for instance, this 98.137.11.163 is the Yahoo's address. Okay. But if you see, I've got some funny numbers here from 98.137. No, I'm sorry, that's not Yahoo's address. That's my, okay. The Yahoo's address. So get my address. If I put IP config, okay, I'll get the configuration for the, okay, this is a laptop and it has a virtual Wi-Fi also, Wi-Fi card, wireless card. Those are all not working. I've not enabled them. The only connection I have is the real physical Wi-Fi. It also has an old, RJ45 jack. You can plug in the LAN cable. That's useful when you're running certain things. But anyway, that's okay. But see, I've got the IP address IP6 address. It's still 128-bit. IP address 4 is 192.128 something. Now this default gateway 192.31.1, I use an ACT connection. So this is the address they've given my modem, or that router. The router works both. You put cable and you can put Wi-Fi. So this is the router's address. And from the router's address, it has gone and pinged into the Yahoo address, and it has got some replies. It didn't lose any packet. This is called an ICMP message. Ping means packet internet groper. It has sent echo. Okay, the ICMP message 0 and 8 are the echo and reply. It has sent that message out. It's got the time here. TTL is a time to live. How many bytes it sent and how long it took for it to respond. And it says, look, I sent 4 packets. I got them back. I didn't have any loss or death of a packet. I mean, packet didn't die. So it sent 4 packets. It got 4, lost nothing. On round trip time, it took 52 milliseconds, which means the server is live and it's listening. Okay, now it's a long story, but the small command, this is the data. Then to check on my own thing is because we use DHCP here. So these are, I mean, the ways in which we slowly start and start understanding how to interpret these things. So I can now take your questions.
Actually, there was one question came up and they asked for a presentation and the recordings.
Yeah,
One
presentation,
question.
I will mail it to.
Yeah.
I'll mail it to the office.
Yes, sir,
not
understood, sir. No problem, sir. Yeah, they'll be into the any information. And also one question is that example for black box and white box testing. I think it was already addressed.
Okay, actually, if you study this black box, white box, gray box, see what we are saying is black box is the original thing where you audit a system without understanding it. So let's say I'm doing let's say payroll. I got a program, everything. Customer says, okay, you test it. I put some test data. Test data must be developed with both valid and invalid transactions. So I put in the test data, I process the payroll, I get the answer. I know the answers, I gave the data. Then I check. The wrong one should have been rejected, right one should have been correctly processed. Everything is fine, I accept it, it's done. But then I start studying. So now I start understanding code, understand programming, etc. Then I'm asking them maybe flowcharts, source program details, and then I'm trying to get into the software itself. Then what I'm doing is called a white box testing. The gray box is in between these two. But then on the other side, what you do is you start using tools. Because somebody says, how secure is this program? Because I'm going to now allow this software, payroll software, to be accessed from my remote sites. It's a construction company, they have remote sites. They will come through some internet connection. Site payroll will be processed in the head office, but my reports will go back there, payslip, whatever. Then the doubt is whether any hacker will come and modify the program. So then I have to do a code security review. Then another person comes and says, are all the controls in place? Like somebody earning more than 20,000, less than 15,000, whatever, ESIP, bonus, so many things, TDS, this, that. Then I have to do more and more reviews, the logic reviews, application reviews, security reviews. Then it's neither white or gray or black. It becomes a complete application review. So today, when we look at these audits, you need to do a complete review. If you are an internal auditor or an IT auditor. If you are a statutory auditor, you can either depend on the reports of the internal or IS auditor, or you can run test data as of now. But as legislation changes, the government may say, or some regulator may say, we won't accept just a test data kind of thing. Even if you use test data, make sure the version you're testing is the same version they are using. Otherwise, they may give you a wrong version and that will work correctly. The real version may not work correctly. So as of now, the regulators are okay. For statutory audit, you can manage the test data. But internal and IS auditors have to go the extra mile.
That was one question, sir. And rest it was for presentation and the complimentary messages. So maybe they've been looking at the recordings, and if there is any question, we'll share it to your mail IDs, and time permits you can respond to it. So can we wind up the session, sir? Or else do you have any presentation or a demo to show?
Yeah, I will almost done. It's almost 8 o'clock now. So
yes, sir. Thank you so much for your time and
all
efforts.
The participants. Thanks Selva for support. Sundarajan sir for coming in. Entire
yes, sir,
SIR.
Yes, sir. Sundaran sir has held up with another meeting in audit committee, so he couldn't join for the end meeting, sir. So, and, we thank you on behalf of SIRC Chairman, Secretary, and Regional Council members and office bearers in their absences for excellent efforts and presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. And any doubts, you feel free to
Yes.
mail me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selva. Thank you.
Yes, sir.